Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Terry Lee Shield. I'm host here at the YouTube channel and of Love School. This video today is about looking at bullying and rejection wounds, and it's part of a series that you can find if you, I'll link it in the description. And this is video 3. This third video today, we are looking at taking responsibility, changing what we can and doing the work to heal. So in this particular video, we're going to be looking at like how we solve the problem, if you like. How are we going to do what we can to live with, heal, recover from, move past, move forward from this, from any bullying, from being targeted or feeling targeted, intimidated by people, being sensitive around rejection. We're going to kind of unpack it a little bit more in this video. Now, if you haven't watched the first 2, you might find them really helpful. In the first one, I kind of framed some of my experiences, that cover some of the types of wounds that I had, that you might be able to begin to look at that, so you can identify, which we'll cover in this video, why that's really important. So you can start to look at your wounds, what's actually been happening if you've been experiencing this sort of pattern in your life. And in the second video, I look at like the deeper stuff, like what that all meant, what was going on under the surface of all of that stuff. So in this video, I'm kind of looking at what now, if you've kind of noticed you have these patterns, this is happening to you. You've looked at like what might be causing it, what might be influencing what's been going on. In this video, it's like, what can you do about it, right? This is kind of a bit more of a nitty-gritty. The reason why this is so important is because we cannot control other people. Sometimes it's even really hard to control ourselves, right? So it's not sensible for us to externalize all the time and decide or be trying to control other people, how they respond to us, how they react to us, or kind of bend and morph and change ourselves to please other people so that these experiences don't happen. Because even if we do that, we're likely still going to get negative responses from some people. Okay, I have never found, and I spent years looking, never found a solution that's going to make you likable to everyone, that's going to stop any, all kind of, that suddenly makes you acceptable to the whole world. It's not how life is. It's not how people are. People are always going to dislike some other people. Doesn't matter what they're like. Doesn't matter how great they are, or how, like I've covered in the other video, it doesn't matter how you look, how you act, what you say, what you do. Someone's always going to take offense. If you're not sure about that, spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the internet, right? Look at any comment section of any, especially like someone who's maybe more influential. You're going to find people will have a go. They could be you might think they're the most awesome person, right? And there's going to be people in there that really hate them, dislike them, try and pick at them, whatever. So this is always going to happen. So the one thing that we have responsibility for is taking away our sensitivity. Now, that's not meaning we don't ever have an emotional response if somebody rejects us, especially if someone's targeted us or something. That is when our nervous system will respond. Like if we are being threatened in some way, it's natural, normal, expected, understandable to have some sort of nervous system response, to feel a bit tense or stressed or whatever, to have an emotional reaction. And I've found it's definitely not about trying to suppress that, which is a tactic that I did very often in the past. I talk a lot about the importance of emotional expression and stuff, and I can link some videos below if this is something you're kind of grappling with a bit. Because the more that I've learned to feel my emotions, just allow them to happen in the moment, acknowledge them, take the message off them, and then respond to life through them, actually, the less emotional response I have, the less intense they are, the shorter they last. The impact of the emotions is much less. So we can take responsibility for certain things. We can take responsibility for how we respond to our emotions. Even so we can't always control our emotions. We might feel a certain way. As we go through a healing process and stuff, like I say, those feelings might change. We might actually have habits of reacting to emotions in quite big ways, and actually they're not there anymore. So we can learn as we mature and become more emotionally intelligent, or calm our nervous system, try new things, to navigate that with more discernment, be generally more grounded and regulated, heal the wounds in us that make us less sensitive. That is something that we can control. And key to what I talk about all over this channel and at Love School is shadow work. Shadow work is how I have learned to heal my wounds, find core wounds, heal them, and then life design is a process that I've used to recover myself, to actually now figure out how I'm going to respond once that wound isn't there anymore. For me, the two go hand in hand. So one's kind of like trying to just really understand yourself, see yourself, know what's causing the wound, nurture and heal that wound. And then part of that life design, like, how are we going to nurture that wound? How are we going to respond to it? And then what are we going to do moving forward without that wound there? Shadow work and life design go hand in hand. Shadow work is kind of looking at all the unconscious stuff that's going on that we're not aware of and bringing them into our awareness. And then life design is like, once we're aware of them, how are we going to change and shift and respond to them? So shadow work often works based on our mind, our nervous system responses. It's like looking at all the things that we might have either in the past avoided or be avoided in the present. So for example, so when I talk about emotions, being present, how our emotions actually feel in our body might be something that in the past we've bypassed. So a lot of shadow work can be about being present in the moment and actually paying attention to what's actually occurring instead of making stories in our mind or creating all this extra meaning. And then the other aspect of shadow work is the mental stuff. So it's like, what is going on in our mind? What meaning are we making all this meaning are we making it make? Looking at past subconscious beliefs we might have, ideas we've formed, whole constructs of our identity or personality linked to being, appearing, responding to certain wounds, coming across in a certain way, or the mask that we might have created to try and like squeeze and fit in to avoid bullying or avoid rejection, whatever it might be. That's all part of shadow work. It's like, and then energetically, shadow work can be looking at the spiritual side of it, which can be both like physical, can be mental, can be emotional. What does all of that, what impact is all of that having on how we are, who we are? So as part of shadow work, we might consider lots of different things. We might look at, like I say, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, how we're responding, but also getting really, really kind of honest with ourselves about where we are and who we're with. This was a huge thing for me. If we continually are putting ourselves in environments that we know are toxic, harmful, we're not welcome, we're not wanted, and then actually feeding energetically off the bullying dynamic because it feeds part of our ego, which is our identity, maybe we're actually gaining benefit off this dynamic, the drama, being vulnerable. Shadow work can get a bit deep into all that, and that's why we've rejected it. Like, maybe if we are intentionally going to places where we know we're going to be bullied, are we taking responsibility for ourselves in that? Don't go to that place. You can avoid a lot of conflict, drama, bullying, targeting by simply not going to certain places. I'm not saying I talked in the previous video about hiding. I'm not saying about hiding away and don't go anyway. But for example, like, I used to volunteer work at this place, right? I'll not go into the whole big story of how I ended up doing that. It was a favor initially because there was a lot of conflict going on, and the person who asked me to join wanted to try and ease out this conflict. So actually, now in retrospect, I realized I put myself into this conflict situation. Now, I had years of being targeted in this place. They saw me as an outsider, even though I was involved for like I say, a decade, right? they saw me as an outsider. No matter what I did, no matter how much I tried to help, no matter how much positive impact it potentially could have had, all they saw was an outsider coming in to their environment that wasn't wanted, and they had to go at me constantly. And I kept going back. I didn't leave. I didn't think, right, I'm not wanted. They're not interested in changing the dynamics here. They don't want, I was feeding into that. And I didn't realize this for years. Like I say, this is not something where I'm like trying to shame anyone or anything. It took me, and it took awful circumstances, in fact, for me to fully realize that part of me was choosing, every time I went into that environment, was choosing to put myself in that environment around that conflict. And why? And that's the shadow work, right? That's really looking at what's going on behind the scenes and being honest about it, being really clear and honest about it, so you can look at the core wounds. So the core wound and something like that was looking for validation. I wanted validation and I wanted appreciation from the person I was trying to help to go into that environment. I wanted to have some sort of appreciation for the change I had made or fixing or whatever it was that was going on there. I was constantly basically trying to get validation from those experiences in some way, because I didn't feel worthy enough, valuable enough. I was constantly trying to show it to people who were never gonna see it ever. No matter how much I tried, they were never ever going to see it. And they would, in fact, see the opposite. All they would see is everything I was trying to do something nice or good or make it better. All they saw, I imagine, was me meddling and, doing what they didn't want me to do. So these wounds that we carry, right, kind of attracting certain experiences and we respond to them. That's like the energetic part of it. That's the spiritual part of it. And how we are processing that all in our mind is how we maintain it, because then what we often use in our mind justifies our behavior, and then we keep acting on it. What we are responsible for when we're looking at this stuff, when we're looking at the shadow work and things, is finding out what's driving us, what's going on behind the scenes, what might that wound be, how it's affecting us, how are we responding. And then once that's all in the awareness, the life design aspect of what we talk about at Love School is then making the change, right? What needs to happen to actually change that scenario at the core? So if the core is, I don't feel like I was trying to fill up a wound, a validation wound, right? I wanted to be valid. Can I start to validate myself? And how do I validate myself? Listening to that niggle that I'm not wanted in this place and not go there. That's a form of self-validation. I've done like a blog and things about self-validation, which I'll link up in the comments and the description and things. That's just one example of how we can start to look at the core of the wound. And then once I have then the skill of realize I need to self-validate, learn the skill of self-validation, the ripple of that in the life design is looking at then what impact will that have? How will that change my life when I start to do that? What choices might I make differently? Like not going to the place, or like finding a more positive avenue for this energy that I want to give and to help. Is there somewhere that wants my giving and wants my helping, and where is that? You know what I mean? So this is what we do. We look at the shadow work. Well, that's what I did. I looked at the shadow work and then looked at the core wound, brought that up. And there might be other stuff that you have to do to bring that up in shadow work. So it might not just be a case of self-inquiry. It might not just be a case of finding out what that is. Sometimes there might be deep spiritual energetic wounds. At Love School, we explore things like inner child healing, reparenting. We look at the freedom from illusions, where we look at all the stories, all the reasons, the deep embedded conditioning that might have given us, which can be quite deep stuff. It can be quite big. I'm not brushing over any of this, pretending that you can just do it all in an instant. Healing and recovery is a process, and especially when we're looking at things like bullying, target intimidation, rejection sensitivity, they're deep wounds. So it's going to be an ongoing healing and recovery process. And I'm simplifying it a lot for these videos. But you can still take the core of what I'm saying and begin to have an impact in your life. We're doing all this so that we are less vulnerable, because we can't stop other people's reactions, choices, actions, but we can heal the wounds within us to feel less vulnerable. So when that happens, it doesn't mean so much to us. It doesn't have so much of an impact. And key to all of that, and alongside this, these wounds that come from bullying and rejection and things, especially if it's been ongoing, is we need to build up our self-belief and our self-confidence. One, that it is possible to heal. Two, that we can heal the wounds that we have. Three, that healing those wounds does mean that we can show up differently in the world, that we can have negative interactions with others and it doesn't bother us. So we also need to build up that muscle of self-esteem and confidence, which comes, it's all kind of entangled. So it comes through the heal. As we heal, we'll get more self-esteem and confidence. We'll have more interactions. We might even face more pushback and resistance, and then have to learn to build up these skills of self-validation. Keep validating yourself, keep showing up authentically. One of the key things, especially in bullying, so this series is about bullying and rejection. Bullying is an intentional power dynamic. So when we're being bullied, intimidated, coerced, overpowered, right, we are making that make us smaller. It's a power dynamic where someone's potentially trying to take our power, make us more vulnerable, take away some of our confidence. The only way it becomes bullying is when we agree to that power dynamic, when we become a victim of that. Otherwise, it's just a conflict. Two adults can have disagreements, be disliked, have rejection, and it not even be targeted, and it not be bullying, intimidation, that sort of thing. The power dynamic is what puts us at a position, and the vulnerability and the wounding is what puts us in a position to feel weakened by it. People obviously, I'm not talking about when we get to more serious abuse and things where people actually are physically harming us, but even then, if somebody is trying to physically harm you, the more confident you are, the more you can stand up to them, the more that you push back, the less likely they are to want to engage in the conflict. Because they're going to engage in that conflict in a power dynamic. When someone's trying to take your power, they want you to be weak. So the stronger you are, the less bothered you are, the more that you're like, all right, come on then. Uneffable with, the less likely people are to going to try and engage in that. So you can't promise that it's going to have this effect, that people, there'll be no negative consequences. But when you have healed wounds, and when you have a certain energy about you that is well, I am prepared for what life throws at us. I am confident in my abilities, my skills, my strength, whatever it is, people are less likely then to see you as a target. And even when they do target you, it's not taking anything away from you. You then, or what I learned, I then have more strength and resilience to just be able to cope with it, and it doesn't have the impact it used to have on me. Even if it's really stressful, even if you do feel at times I have an ongoing situation at the moment where someone's constantly trying to intimidate me in my neighborhood. And it's really testing me and my resilience. And sometimes I feel it in the body. Sometimes my nervous system responds, or sometimes I begin to notice maybe it's certain thought patterns and things. And I'm like, no, because you know what? I am going to be myself. And that person doesn't have a right to intimidate me to behave in a way that makes them comfortable. And this is just a level of confidence that I have just learned to step out in the world in. And if that causes more consequences, that person really doesn't like it and keeps on intimidating me, I'll do what I can in my power to confront that. I'm not going to just shy away and shirk it. Then, I've kind of followed through, saying taking actions that I can to defend myself. And not physically, but using different authorities, different protections that we have placed in our society. by being seen and connecting with other people in my community. Even other people have started to notice it now, so now I realize it's not just me in it, which again is kind of changing the power dynamic. So when we notice, because like I say, I in the past I talked about I would often disconnect. When I disconnected and felt like, oh, it's just me in this situation, then that power dynamic, it's like one-on-one, and if they have more advantage in one way or another, then that would be an imbalance. But actually, now other people have started to notice and get involved. It's not just one against one, it's one against more. So I'm not as vulnerable then, which means then the interactions impact me less. So it's kind of, we can't shapeshift and bend ourselves to all circumstances. But the more that I have learned these skills, healing the core wounds, filling myself up, feeling less vulnerable, feeling stronger, feeling more able to cope with life, and knowing that other people's responses to me are not my problem. What I can deal with is what I'm responsible for, which is how I process my emotions, which is how I defend myself, which is how I interact with others. This has helped me to maintain my energy much more so I can enjoy my life, because it's not about them. It's not about the other people. It's not about, bullies or people who are trying to intimidate. It's not, don't make it about them. Doesn't matter. They can get on with their lives. If their lives are that meaningless and miserable that they just have to like obsess about mine, leave them to it. But I'm not going to not live my life in a way that I know is best for me because of them. And this is what the healing and recovery process has shown me, that I'm no longer sensitive in that way to rejection. And anytime, because even like rejection sensitivity and stuff can come, like I say, from deep wounds in relationships. So even being rejected by friends and things like that can cause this little pang. And I just look down at the deep wound, what is going on there, and fill myself up with that. Put things in place in my life design, put things in place in my actions or responses to myself to heal that wound. And the more and more and more and more and more we keep doing that, the easier it is to deal with all these situations. Even better, the next step then is if other people's responses to us can become so minimal that we can actually make light of them. Maybe it's even not to pick at somebody else, not to like belittle them, but just to hold our own power, just shrug it off or have a laugh about it, make light of it. That vulnerability just is not there anymore. And one of the key things that I learned as well about like bullying is people love to be liked, right? So if someone is actually trying to like belittle you and take your power and make you feel shit about yourself, the best way to deflect that is to say something nice about them. Oh, I thought you were a really nice person. I really like how you're dressed today. And laugh. I find it really hard to be mean when you're nice to them. Do you know what I mean? But when we don't have that wound to make what they're saying about us, like we know it's not real, we know it's not true. It's just their projections, just their opinion, just their idea. It's not going to impact us. And then don't make it about them either. You're a bad person. You're horrible. You're bigger than, make them a bigger, more negative kind of influence on you. They're just somebody else. They're just somebody else. And I like to think I get to the point where we can see the best in each other. And I do try and work on these practices in myself to try and see the best in people and realize sometimes we all have this stuff, vulnerabilities, wounds, responses to life that aren't ideal. And getting to that point where we can engage with life from that perspective, I found a lot more helpful, especially then dealing with the vulnerability and the wounds and the triggers and that sort of thing. So thank you so much for watching this video. There is going to be one more video after this one where I just kind of go through everything we've covered, and it'll be out next week. So please do remember to like and subscribe, click the notification bell, and you'll be reminded when that comes out. If you haven't watched the previous videos, you might want to. It might be helpful to give some better insight. Have a look in the description. I'll tag all the other videos, the playlist, give you all any other content that I've mentioned that's going to be helpful. That'll all be in the description there. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.